Season 2, Episode 2, The Return of Harmony. Discord, the self-proclaimed spirit of chaos, has returned to Equestria, bending all of Ponyville to his will. In the midst of the countless anomalies now flooding the landscape, a particularly strange Earth pony is glimpsed. She has never been seen before and is only sparingly glimpsed afterwards. No one knows for sure exactly who or what she might be. The creation of character designer Rebecca Dart, Screwball was quick to gain a certain level of notoriety despite her brief appearance. Numerous interpretations have been put forth in order to understand this character, but in the end all we have to go on are 2 appearances in the show and 4 in the comics, with no actual speaking roles. So, just who or what is Screwball? Screwball is a pink earth pony with a mane and tail that is violet in primary coloration, with white highlights. Her cutie mark depicts a screw positioned next to a baseball, likely the in-universe originator for the character's name. The only piece of clothing she is ever seen to wear is a small propeller beanie cap, more commonly attributed to the character of Button Mash. Physically, one of the character's more distinctive traits are the eyes, which exhibit no apparent pupil but rather an inward spiral that adorns the iris itself. It is, however, hard to say whether this is purely to be considered a stylization resulting from the medium or a feature perceivable in universe. Nevertheless, the theme of spirals is a consistent one in regards to the character's design, with the highlights in her mane exhibiting a similar shape. A feature that is far more perceptible is the character's apparent levitational abilities. This can be seen in The Return of Harmony Part 2 and IDW's Friendship is Magic Issue 9. Whilst the former may have resulted purely from Discord's impact on gravity in the local area, the latter has no such inciting circumstances, demonstrating a clear if slight upwards trajectory whilst airborne, something that could only be achieved through the application of lift, or at least some form of controlled flight. In Friendship is Magic Issue 1, Screwball appears to hang downwards from behind a comic panel. There are no table legs or shadow or anything with which to indicate that any kind of leverage exists, with all indications being that the character is either levitating behind the panel or using and therefore aware of the panel itself. Even her first appearance in Return of Harmony seems to demonstrate some level of metafictional self-awareness, with the character starting out by facing towards the audience. In issue 75, she appears in the background of the scene during the initial attack by the villain known as Cosmos, appearing as an infant. Best estimates place this event as occurring roughly over 1,000 years ago, around the time of Discord's initial reign. Given how Cosmos's attack had the consequence of blending a variety of objects from across time and space, it is not known if Screwball was merely caught up in this and thus displaced from her timeline, or if she actually originated from this time period and thus exhibits a form of longevity. As of right now, it is the former that is considered most likely. Behaviour-wise, Screwball appears to exhibit a somewhat childlike disposition in the few cases where she is glimpsed. Beyond that, with the limited appearances, we don't really have enough evidence in order to establish anything more in depth regarding her character. All in all, Screwball is something of an enigma, and one with no shortage of room for speculation. One of the most popular headcanon interpretations of Screwball amongst the Brony community is that she is either the offspring or the disciple of the character Discord. This might even have some weight given the character's appearance during the Cosmos arc. However, as it is, the personal connection between the 2 characters is loose at best, with no on-screen interactions being glimpsed beyond this and the alternate timeline sighting in the Cutie Remark Part 2. If such a connection was in effect, further evidence of such would already have presented itself in the time since. In the end, the most likely possibility is that Screwball was merely an innocent bystander who was altered by Discord's magic, much like Big Macintosh. Indeed, there are a number of characters suspected to be Screwball's true identity, based mostly on the design of the mane and tail. Relying on show continuity, such a diagnosis makes sense, since Screwball was never subsequently glimpsed outside of her original timeline appearance. Given how Equestria was cleansed of Discord's magic by the end of the episode, Screwball would likely have turned back to normal. However, that does not explain her subsequent appearances within the comics. Even if we consider the comic continuity to be separate from the show continuity, we are still left with the question of how Screwball can continue to exist after the defeat of Discord. Either she somehow managed to avoid the spell cast by the elements of harmony, as well as any subsequent attempts at curing her condition, or her appearance requires an alternative explanation. Given what we know, this leaves us with only two possibilities to work with. Much like Discord, it may be that Screwball is an entity unto herself, a spiritual being with an attraction to chaos. The evidence for this originates from some of the few locations she has glimpsed: the outskirts of the summer wrap-up hoedown and festival in IDW's Zen and the Art of Gazebo Repair, visiting the Apple Convention in Friends Forever issue 9, joining a town conflict in Ponyville days, and of course following Discord in Return of Harmony and the Cutie Remark. A common theme amongst these appearances is the suggestion that a lot is happening within the area at the time, inciting some form of chaos. From the episode Discordant Harmony, we learn that chaos magic itself is generated through the creation and sustaining of disharmony, i.e. the breaking down of a stable system or the formation of an unconventional system that is constantly changing. The magic itself is generated either directly via the environment, or perhaps more likely, indirectly through the subjective reaction and interaction of those present. As such, it is feasible that chaotic events such as large gatherings would generate their own form of chaos magic, albeit in small amounts. While this is still theory, the results do seem to point towards such an indication. Taking what we know about Discord into account, it is hypothetically possible for Screwball to actively utilize chaos magic as a form of sustenance. If we continue to follow up on this possibility, given the relative lack of sightings, it could be Screwball spends most of her time within Discord's Chaos Realm, the strongest source of concentrated chaos magic in the known MLP universe. Sightings outside this realm could easily be attributed to the character's curiosity. While this is not an unreasonable theory, there are numerous events within both the show and comics that might be described as chaotic. As such, we are left with the question of why the character is absent from so many of these events. This can be explained by the presence of Discord's Chaos Realm, but what about the period at which he was imprisoned? In the end, such a theory asks us to assume an awful lot, in particular that such an entity might exist. As yet, the only similar example we have is Discord, and the idea that he would allow an entity that would be competing for the same food source as him seems counterintuitive. Then again, Discord's the spirit of chaos, so perhaps such a notion makes sense in some chaotic way. All in all, it's just not much to go on. Over the course of this investigation, a factor the Society found particularly curious is the odd similarity between Screwball and another character, Pinkie Pie. While this similarity is far from consistent, it's undeniable that most of the traits exhibited by the former find themselves replicated in the latter. Everything from levitating and breaking the laws of physics, right down to the spiral eyes, childlike attitude, fourth wall breaks, and even the main style and method of expression are surprisingly similar. There's certainly a high likelihood that Screwball's nature may have been derived through very similar means. A distinctive feature of the MLP universe is the ability of the mind to influence both the body and the environment. We are already familiar with the example of Flutterbat, demonstrating that a simple implanted idea can physically alter a character into an entirely new form. However, we now know from both Pinkie in Yakety Sax and the town of Hope Hollow in Rainbow Road Trip that such emotional states can also affect the local environment on both an individual and systemic level. From this, it is possible such a form as demonstrated by Screwball is merely an external manifestation of extreme internal emotion. Taking that a step further, it may be that her appearance coinciding with somewhat chaotic events is at least partially down to her state of mind fueling the environment. Indeed, given everything we've seen, this seems like the most likely explanation. Whatever state of mind resulted in both these characters exhibiting the same conditions, Screwball seems to be in a comparatively more extreme state. Whether this is to her detriment or otherwise is a separate discussion in and of itself. That being said, something interesting to take away from this theory is that, hypothetically, many of the same abilities as demonstrated by these characters could easily be emulated by other Earth ponies. Indeed, this is something we have seen evidence of on occasion, albeit rarely and not just with Earth ponies. Whether or not others will be learning to fly anytime soon is another story. Even so, it is still interesting to consider. As bizarre as such characters can seem, sometimes the simplest explanation is the most likely. However, in the case of Screwball, even the simplest explanation offers a lot of room for consideration. Despite still being somewhat well known, she has slowly drifted into relative obscurity as time goes on, remembered more for her headcanon interpretations than her actual canon existence. Nevertheless, she remains an interesting and memorable example of character design, with many fascinating possibilities surrounding her form. Whatever the reason for Screwball's condition, we can at least take some comfort in the knowledge that she appears to be content within her existence. In just a few seconds of animation, she managed to capture the heart of many a viewer. Whether we shall see her again, only time will tell.